Hello and welcome to another edition of Inside Europe, the weekly current affairs magazine, brought to you by DW, Germany's international broadcaster. I'm Kate Laycock. Today on the show, has Germany's firewall against the far right just fallen? We'll be taking you through a historic week in the German parliament with wide-reaching implications for both German and European democracy. Expect expert legal opinion, political analysis, and a beginner's guide to democracy prepping.
Only if we are active, only if those millions on the streets are active, we can protect this democracy. There's no one else we should put that trust into but in ourselves.
Seit Gründung der Bundesrepublik vor über 75 Jahren gab es immer einen klaren Konsens aller Demokratinnen und Demokraten. In unseren Parlamenten machen wir mit extremen Rechten.
That's German Chancellor Olaf Scholz addressing the German parliament on Wednesday. Since the founding of the German Federal Republic over 75 years ago, he told the assembled politicians, there was always a clear consensus amongst Democrats. In our parliament, we never join forces with the extreme right.
Schon immer egal war, die extremen Rechten. Das wissen Sie.
For the first time in the history of the modern German Federal Republic, a motion has passed with the backing of the far right. Now, it's important to say that this was a motion and as such is not legally binding. We're recording this on Thursday. On Friday, another test will come when a related bill is put to the vote. For coverage of that session, please do follow DW's news coverage via the Breaking News app. Nevertheless, irrespective of what happens on Friday, it was Wednesday's voting through of a 5-point motion on immigration and asylum proposed by CDU leader and favourite to become the next German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, that was hailed by the AfD as a historic moment, representing the breaking of a taboo which has so far held at a national level at least against mainstream parties voting with the far right. Friedrich Merz explicitly framed the motion as a response to a knife attack in the Bavarian town of Aschaffenburg, perpetrated by a psychologically disturbed Afghan asylum seeker who had been flagged for deportation. Initially, Merz declared that he did not care who voted for the motion as long as it passed. In the actual text, however, he clarified that his party, the CDU, regards the far-right AfD as an opponent, not a partner. In an uncharacteristically impassioned speech before the vote, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz told the Parliament that the measures being proposed by the CDU went against European law. So, what are the 5 points in Merz's 5-point plan, and are they legal? I asked Gisela Seidler, immigration lawyer and chair of the Migration Committee of the German Bar Association, to go through the document with me.
So, the establishing of permanent border controls is not legal. I think everybody is clear about this. The Schengen's border code says that there should not be permanent border controls. It's just not following the law, yeah. And I think this is very important because we have a constitutional state, and the laws, also the laws of the European Union, are binding. And so government should not violate this law, yeah. It's against the rule of law.
Right. Moving on to point number 2 in the 5-point plan. This would be turning back all people without valid documents at the border, and this would be irrespective of whether or not they are seeking asylum. Is this legal?
This would violate the Dublin regulation, which says it's the first country of entry or a country that gave the visa to the person is responsible for the asylum procedure. That means normally it's not the neighboring country, it's not Austria or Switzerland, but normally it's one of the countries at the outer border, like Greece, Bulgaria, or Italy, who is in charge of the case. But it's not legal to deny entry and sending people back to Austria if they ask for asylum.
If people have no means of claiming asylum at the border, in the absence of other legal routes, effectively what would happen would be the abolishment of the right to seek asylum. Is that protected legally?
The right of asylum is protected by international law and also by national law. National law could be changed, but the international law could not be changed. Yeah? So we have still the Geneva Convention for Refugees. We still have the European Human Rights Convention. And of course, it's the Anerkennungsrichtlinie, which means is the European regulation about asylum and refugee status. So this cannot be changed easily. And what, of course, will happen is there are more people smugglers if people are denied entry. So people will try to go into Germany illegally again, and they will probably come here with cars or with buses or somewhere hidden.
You said that national law could be changed. Just to be clear, are we talking here about the Constitution?
Yes, but the Constitution can be changed if there's a majority of 2/3 of the Parliament.
Point number 3 on the 5-point plan is mandatory internment of people who have been flagged for deportation. Would this be legal?
It's not possible to put somebody in indefinite detention, because this would be a breach of the Article 5 of the European Human Rights Convention. And here, I don't know what he really thinks, or what Mr. Merz really thinks. If he really wants to put 200,000 people, even children, in deportation prison, this is really not possible. It's not possible practically, but it's also illegal because it would be against the European Human Rights Convention, probably also against the Constitution, the right for freedom of person, and also against the Return Directive of the European Union, where it says that deportation prison should always be the ultima ratio if nothing other can work to make people leave the country.
So we've covered points 3 and 5. That just leaves point 4, which is it's a slightly more diffuse point. It's about basically giving more power to on a local level and to police to carry out deportations or measures that will lead to deportations. Is there anything new here from a legal perspective?
It's not really clear what he means. He wants to have some federal prisons, so it's connected to point 3 and point 5 because the Länder don't have enough places in the deportation prisons. So he thinks about having big deportation prisons, and which should be run by the federal border police. The border police is against it, the federal border police, because they don't know how they should do all these things.
Finally, I don't want to keep you too long because I know that this is a work day. You're a migration lawyer and your phone will start ringing any minute now. Presumably, you are being contacted at the moment by clients who are deeply, deeply worried about their own situation. What have the past few days been like for you as a migration lawyer?
We had a deportation yesterday of a Sierra Leonean man, and he was the father of a newborn child. The child was born in December, and the mother has the refugee status, and the child will also have refugee status, and still the family was torn apart. And this shows how hard these laws are executed in the moment, Some years ago, they would not have deported a father of a newborn child, before he can have some bonding with his baby. And so in this case, it will take probably years, or he will never come back to Germany. So this will be a child without a father in Germany. These are the consequences if everybody is deported who is a rejected asylum seeker.
Gisela Seidler, immigration lawyer and chair of the Migration Committee of the German Bar Association, with that reminder of the human cost of political decisions. It's to the political dimensions of the week's events in the German Parliament that we turn now. Our political correspondent, Thomas Sparrow, has, of course, been following events closely for us from DW's Berlin studio. And my first question to him when we spoke on Wednesday was, of course, has Germany's firewall against the right fallen?
It depends how you view this. So if you look at what CDU politicians have stressed, they say that they're still not necessarily going to cooperate, and I focus on the word cooperate, with the AfD. They see it as a realistic way, as a pragmatic way of dealing with problems in the country. A completely different side of the story comes from the other side of the political spectrum. They are saying that this is a dangerous situation for Germany because once the firewall begins to crack, then basically the wall has fallen. And that's why they're asking Friedrich Merz to not go ahead with his plans and to reconsider in general that idea that he wants to bring forward proposals, even if those proposals in the end need the support from the far-right AfD.
Right. And, of course, contribute to an ongoing normalisation of a party, which I think it really is important to stress is not normal. I mean, this is a party that Germany's own intelligence services regard in parts as confirmed right-wing extremist. There are sections of the AfD that have been clearly given that categorisation.
And that's why, specifically also for Mr. Merz, it's a very risky gamble, because on the one hand, he could indeed end up gaining back some of the voters that in the past few years went away from the CDU to the AfD, in particular because they considered that the AfD was moving to the right while the CDU was moving too much to the centre. So it could pay off. It could be good for him and the party. But there are others that are saying that this could be political suicide if the voters that would normally vote for the CDU actually are scared from voting for the CDU because they're seeing that now the CDU is directly or indirectly willing to work with the AfD, a party that, as you say, is in part already considered to be far-right extremist, confirmed far-right extremist by Germany's intelligence services. So it's a gamble, a very risky gamble, and by the way, also a gamble that can be very consequential for Germany, because this could set a precedent also for coalition building after the elections on February 23rd. It could set a precedent also for what kind of cooperation you see in Parliament in the years to come.
And indeed what it means for Europe, because as the preamble makes clear, he regards the current European immigration and borders framework as being, to quote the document, dysfunctional. He describes the Schengen Treaty, which establishes the principle of free movement of people and goods between European countries. So that's a core part of Europe as we know it, is described as dysfunctional. This is new, isn't it? That a German presumed chancellor-in-waiting would be going into an election campaign with such an attack on a European core principle.
It is very important indeed, because Germany's main development, Germany's main understanding of the world is that Germany is German and European. So the European Union is something that most people here in Germany really defend as something positive. Yes, there are criticisms. Yes, in the past there have been issues where Germans also view critically, but this is really, as you point, very strong criticism towards European principles, and that's why these kinds of proposals have also been met with criticism by other European partners. And this is also why there are also discussions about what that would mean from a European point of view if indeed some of these proposals end up being implemented. There are those who say that it would really send the wrong signal to Europe, that it would really cause a ripple effect on many other countries, especially when it comes to migration. There's, however, also another perspective saying that it could actually push the European Union to change its migration laws and to change its migration positions in a way that could benefit the different nation states, because if Germany begins with these permanent border controls or by rejecting attempts to illegal entry, as the CDU puts it, that this could then prompt other countries to follow suit, and that basically that would mean that the European Union institutions in Brussels would have to sit down and decide, okay, what comes next for European asylum.
And in the meantime, of course, the debate in these crucial last weeks before the German elections has become completely dominated by the issue of migration, immigration and asylum. What about other core topics like, for example, the escalating climate crisis, which is in itself a major driver of migration?
Well, in fact, you and I, speaking a few weeks ago, were talking about the economy, which is another major topic for many. But the fact is that at least now seems to have been overtaken by the issue of migration/security. So it's not only about irregular migration or illegal migration, as some parties call it, but it's also about migration linked to security, especially when it comes to failed asylum seekers. So migration, definitely one topic. The economy, a second topic, which is playing a very important role. The climate crisis is one of those topics that plays a big role, but is not, I would say, the top of people's minds. It was, by the way, the top of many people's minds during the last election process, which was one of the reasons why the Greens managed to get such support in the vote. Nevertheless, this time round, it has not been as relevant, or at least as present in people's minds, as the issues of the economy and migration related to security.
Thomas Sparrow in Berlin, thank you very much.
My pleasure, Kate.
I'm Kate Laycock in Germany. You're listening to Inside Europe. That question that I put to Thomas Sparrow, has Germany's firewall fallen? I put it to Arne Semsrott as well. He's the author of the speculative non-fiction book Takeover, What Happens When Right-Wing Extremists Come to Power. Here's what he said.
It already had cracks before, and I think that the cracks are so big now that you could probably say that it's fallen. So the whole concept of isolating the AfD, making clear that democratic parties don't work together with them, that really is history, and that actually leaves the question open where we're heading to, especially after the elections, because something that was unimaginable, a proper coalition with the AfD, now seems to be something that could actually happen in Germany as well, and that is new. That hasn't been the case in the past 75 years.
So, according to Arne Semsrott, the significance of this week's events lie not just in the breaking of a taboo, but in the creation of a space in which, at some point in the future, the breaking of the ultimate taboo, the forming of a governing coalition at the national level with the far right, might become reality in Germany. To make clear, no commentator that I know of is expecting that to happen this year, but what about the elections after that? In the meantime, says Semsrott, there is a lot that ordinary citizens can do to defend democracy and to prepare for harder times to come. Together with his colleagues at the Freedom of Information portal Frag den Staat, or Ask the State, Semsrott has put together a series of videos aimed at empowering German citizens to, in the words of tens of thousands of protesters in Berlin and Cologne last week, be the firewall themselves. So, what's in Frag den Staats Democracy Toolkit?
Was, wenn uns irgendwann alle Informationen verweigert werden?
Democracy tool number 1. Leak.
Yeah, so our organization, Frag den Staat, originally is a freedom of information platform. And the idea originally was that we would use the law in order to get information from the state. But we've seen in the past years, and we'll see that much more in the coming years, that using the legal avenues, using the law won't be as effective as it should be. And that leaves it open how to get the crucial information we need to control the government. And the answer that we're giving to that is we need more leaks. We need better infrastructure on our side, so on media's, NGO sides, to receive information, to make sure that people who leak can do so anonymously and in a safe way. And then infrastructure on the side of the people who want to leak. So we're taking care of people who want to leak but don't know how. We're trying to educate people within the public sector, within companies, on how to build their internal infrastructure so people can give information, crucial information to media. And we think it's very useful to do that now for the coming years to prepare so that people, when it comes to that crucial moment, know how to do it and won't make mistakes or will make less mistakes in that case.
Was passiert, wenn die Demokratie von innen heraus verfault?
Democracy tool number 2.
Was du
Block.
tun kannst, dich vorzubereiten? Und wir zeigen dir, wie. Wenn Wissenschaftler
We know not only from Germany but from other countries as well that public officials wield some very special powers that others in society don't have. They actually have the power to block something that the government wants to do. So I think what the common perception is that when the government wants to do something, they just do it, right? But in Germany, we have got about 5 million people who work for the state, and those 5 million people are the people that matter when it comes to government decisions, because they are the ones who can, raise doubts within a process of trying to put a law into effect. They can make it all very, very slow. They can find ways to actually sabotage the government in a legal way, and we're trying to educate public officials on all the ways that they can use, all the subtle ways and not so subtle ways, in order to make it harder for a government to put into practice, for example, authoritarian measures.
Was ist, wenn die Demokratie zerbricht und die Institutionen versagen?
Democracy tool number 3, sue.
Dich darauf vorzubereiten. Und wir zeigen dir wie.
Yes, so litigation, and especially strategic litigation, is very powerful. We try to get media and NGOs in Germany to actually litigate more, to go to the courts more in order to make measures, especially authoritarian measures by government, ineffective. That is something that I think is still useful even if democracy goes weaker and weaker, because I think we need to use every tool that we have, and litigation is part of it. Even in a case where the litigation system, where the judicial system isn't as effective anymore, going to courts still is very effective in a PR way, in a campaign way, because we have to show that we use every measure that we can take in order to stop authoritarians from getting what they want.
Was passiert, wenn niemand mehr für die Demokratie kämpft? Das könnte schon bald Realität sein.
Democracy tool number 4, protect.
Und wir zeigen dir wie. Die Rechten setzen auf mehr als...
Yes, we established a legal aid fund for people who are subject to threats, to violence, to legal actions from the right wing in Germany. And that legal aid fund is growing by the day. And we think that especially organizations like us, who are in a more privileged position because we've got funding by individual donors, we've got a bigger team of people working in legal matters, in tech and so on, that especially organizations like us have an obligation to protect other activists, to protect initiatives, to protect smaller organizations. And I think this is really the time for solidarity. This is the time to act together and not to only look after yourselves and your organization, but also to everybody who is active in civil society.
Arne Semsrott, Takeover author and director of the Freedom of Information NGO Frag den Staat, Ask the State there. When asked about the We Are the Firewall chants that can be heard at various pro-democracy demonstrations in Germany at the moment, this is what he said.
We are all that we have, I don't think that it's the time to trust political parties, especially the ones that are active in parliament right now, to deliver on the promises of a free and democratic society. And what we can see and what we have seen over the past years in Germany is that civil society really is the guarantee for a humane and just society. Only if we are active, only if those millions on the streets are active, we can protect this democracy. There's no one else we should put that trust into but in ourselves.
This is Inside Europe, and I'm Kate Laycock in Germany. This is Inside Europe, and I'm Kate Laycock in Germany. In the next half hour, Robert Fico cries coup in Slovakia.
Well, I think that these claims are absolutely delusional. I mean, we are EU and NATO member state. We have public policy. We have a relatively stabilized institutional system. Our opposition is working in the parliament.
Geopolitical tensions hot up in the Arctic, the opening of the China-Europe Express, a Spanish photojournalist, and a musical anniversary. Last Friday, I found myself glued to my phone, captivated by the sight of Bratislava's Freedom Square, lit up by tens of thousands of tiny lights being held aloft by protesters who turned out peacefully to declare their allegiance to the European idea, their rejection of populist Prime Minister Robert Fico's pro-Kremlin course, and what they say is an increasingly authoritarian turn in Slovakia. Elsewhere in the country, parallel protests were held in over 20 further cities. Since then, Prime Minister Robert Fico has gone on the offensive, claiming foreign provocateurs in cahoots with the liberal opposition plan to use the protests to bring about a coup. Robert Cameron has been following the developments from Prague.
Slovakia under Robert Fico is no stranger to protests. They've been a regular occurrence since he formed his fourth administration, a coalition of leftist, nationalist and populist parties, in October 2023. But last week's were of a different magnitude. Around 100,000 people took to the streets, 60,000 in the capital Bratislava alone, shouting enough of Fico and Slovakia is Europe. And they were in defiance of his extraordinary claim that a group of foreign-funded activists were planning to use the protests to bring about a coup d'état against his government.
Chcem poďakovať pánovi riaditeľovi Slovenskej informačnej služby, že dnes bol veľmi konkrétny.
He told reporters the information came from a classified report by Slovak intelligence, which appeared to consist of several emails laying out a timetable of public protests and sit-ins of government buildings. The emails were leaked to the newspaper SME, which is when a small NGO based in the city of Banská Bystrica called Not in Our Town came forward to claim them. Martina Strmienova is one of the coordinators.
We didn't know anything at that time. It was just said that Slovak intelligence service have some information which are like very serious. Only later on, when the email leaked to one of the newspapers, I realized that it's probably something we discussed in our organization. So it was kind of first like shock, a little bit of stress. I wouldn't believe that this would be something that Slovak intelligence service has to make such a fuss about. And then after several hours, we decided that we can share the whole email because it's nothing secret.
Nothing secret and not particularly explosive either. The emails called for entirely peaceful, non-violent protests and were sent to some 140 members. They were even written with the help of ChatGPT. And most importantly, Martina told me, they had not and do not work with foreign provocateurs.
Môžete sa uškrňať koľko chcete.
Prime Minister Fico promised that the activists, whom he said were veterans of the recent protests in Georgia, as well as the 2014 overthrow of Viktor Yanukovych in Ukraine, would quickly be deported. But since then, there's been no new information. We don't know their names or what they look like, or even if they exist at all. The opposition is sceptical. The intelligence service is now run by the son of one of Mr. Fico's MPs, and critics say it's simply doing his bidding. Grigory Mesezhnikov is a veteran political scientist who has himself been attending the demonstrations.
Well, I think that these claims are absolutely delusional. I mean, we are EU and NATO member state. We have public policy. We have a relatively stabilized institutional system. Our opposition is working in the parliament, and every day, I mean, they are under the scrutiny of all actors, government, civil society, media, and so on. So all these claims which Robert Fico presented in the context of his constant, permanent efforts to concentrate his power. He is now afraid of losing this power, and then he employed this absolutely delusional but also unfortunately dangerous narrative.
In fact, the story of a secret cabal of US-funded provocateurs seems to have been quietly dropped as Mr. Fico seeks to shift the narrative on what seems to be a daily basis. On Monday, he announced plans to change the Slovak constitution to clarify, among other things, that there were only two biological sexes in Slovakia, male and female. On Tuesday, he reinvigorated the row with Ukraine over Russian gas imports, telling MPs, Zelensky is the enemy, I don't like him. What comes next is anyone's guess. Rob Cameron, DW, Prague.
My colleagues from DW's Programmes for Europe department will of course be following those developments closely. Keep an eye on DW's Europe pages or download the Breaking News app to stay up to date. In the meantime, time to head north. Tromsø in Norway once again hosted the annual Arctic Frontiers Conference this week, and what used to be a nice, relaxing ticket home for our Norwegian-born but usually UK-based reporter Lars Bavanger is rapidly turning into a hot geopolitical potato. It's not just President Trump's designs on Greenland that have been shaking things up, although that, of course, is part of it. Here's Lars to set the scene for us.
Tromsø calls itself the capital of the Arctic, and every January for nearly 2 decades, this city has hosted thousands of decision makers and other stakeholders from the 8 Arctic nations. But I think I can safely say people here in the Arctic have never seen such controversy surrounding their region as this year.
People really don't even know if Denmark has any legal right to it. But if they do, they should give it up because we need it for national security. That's for the free world.
President Trump has not ruled out the use of force to take Greenland, an Arctic nation and part of the Kingdom of Denmark. Few Arctic watchers here believe that could happen, but it certainly focused minds.
So, of course, this is very disturbing for the Nordic countries and for Denmark and Greenland in particular, of course.
Stian Bones is Professor of Modern History at the Arctic University of Norway here in Tromsø. He thinks it's too early to say what Trump really wants, but that the president's mind might be on another country altogether, namely China.
Russia's war on Ukraine from 2022 changed everything really dramatically. But there's also other trends that has worked in the same direction. And one thing is the rise of China and the US approach to China. And you have this notion in the United States that there is cooperation between China and Russia in the Arctic. The Russian part of the Arctic is where China is allowed to operate.
Big powers like Russia and China are flexing their muscles in the Arctic for several reasons. Global warming is opening up new shipping lanes and access to Russian ports for ships from Asia. Melting ice is also creating easier access to the region's vast mineral and fossil fuel reserves. Magnus Mæland is mayor of Norway's northernmost municipality, Sør-Varanger, also the only municipality with a border with Russia. He lives with the new geopolitical realities every day.
We are at the start or the end of a future northern sea route. We have all the minerals and the experiences we need in a green transition. So we are the most strategic, important area in the high north of Norway. We have 400 ethnic Russians living in our municipality, but also 300 Ukrainians. But we have closed the door to Russia and said hello to the EU and NATO. There were 3 delegations from China that knocked on my door in the first month of my period as mayor. And that was challenging. And was pretty clear that we will not sell any critical infrastructure.
Well, the ice-cold wind here in Tromsø belies the fact that the Arctic region is heating nearly 4 times faster than the rest of the world. Climate change and the need to mitigate it presents a particular conundrum for indigenous people who have lived here longer than anyone else.
I'm Aili Geskidalo. I'm an indigenous advisor for Amnesty Norway and the former president of the Sami Parliament in Norway. And because we live cross-border, nobody seems to take the full responsibility of protecting the areas we need to for our livelihoods and for our survival, to be able to remedy the climate change. There needs to be good green policies, but the same policies is often also a threat to Sami livelihoods. So it's a paradox of Arctic indigenous peoples.
Sami reindeer herders and activists have repeatedly taken legal action to try to prevent wind farm developments in traditional reindeer herding areas. Infrastructure linked to increased military activity in the Arctic is another challenge they are facing.
And the opportunities are massive, and we need to grasp those opportunities.
The Norwegian Foreign Minister, Espen Barth Eide, has long been a champion of Arctic cooperation. Before 2022, he was used to hosting sizable delegations from Russia during this conference. They're no longer welcome. And this year, the US delegation dwindled to near zero due to the chaos created by President Trump's sudden changes at the State Department. So, are we seeing a dwindling in interest for cooperation?
I don't think that's the problem. I would almost say that there is more interest in the Arctic than we sometimes wanted. So I don't think, to maintain attention is not the problem. It's rather to make sure that we bring with us this strong vision of high north, low tension also into the future.
Lars Bavanger, DW, Tromsø.
Now, my ears pricked up when I heard shipping lanes being mentioned in that report there, because here in Germany, we have big news in that department. The small and usually rather sleepy port town of Wilhelmshaven is now the European docking point of the brand new China-Europe Express, a direct shipping line linking the continent to eastern China. The maiden voyage took just 27 days, setting a new record as the fastest maritime shipping route between Asia and Europe. Natalie Carney was in Wilhelmshaven to get the full story.
You'd be forgiven for not knowing the small town of Wilhelmshaven, nestled on the western coast of the Jade Bight, a bay in the North Sea, roughly 200 kilometers as the crow flies, or in this case the seagull, west of Hamburg. But with the arrival of the China-Europe Express, or CEX, it's set to become one of the key gateways connecting Asia and Europe. Last week, the Kawa Ningbo cargo ship docked at the Wilhelmshaven Jedewieser port in the early hours of the morning, just 26 days after setting sail from China's Ningbo Zhoushan port. That's nearly 2 weeks earlier than previous transit times.
We have, for some of our clients, some cargo on this vessel.
Dustin Burkhardt is a sales manager at Zufa Logistics Group in Hamburg and handles customers across a broad range of industries. His job, though, was made a lot more complicated during the COVID-19 pandemic, which nearly brought global shipping to a standstill. Then, politics added to the disruptions, causing longer transit times and higher shipping costs. Attacks by Yemen's Houthi rebels over the war in Gaza on multiple commercial vessels in the Red Sea has prompted shipping companies to avoid the Suez Canal and reroute around the southern tip of Africa, adding up to 10 days to their journey.
When the Red Sea issue came across, you have this long transit times. So especially from China, you have the China Railway, which were more and more used, but based on the sanctions from the European Union and Russia, some cargo were not allowed anymore to go through Russia. So we have a few customers which were affected by that, which really gave us some issues to bring the cargo in time, to keep the processes, especially for automotive or customers who have their USPs on quick cargo delivery.
But Zhejiang Seaport Logistics Group, the driving force behind the China-Europe Express, had the solution, says General Manager for their Germany operations, Pixie Zhang.
Normally, if you want to ship a cargo from China to Europe, it takes 40 to 50 days. It's really a long time. And our CEX service from Ningbo Port to Wilhelmshaven, we're using point-to-point model.
meaning it's a direct route with no intermediate stops. They've also tapped into Kawa Shipping's years of experience transporting goods between Asia and the Middle East, for which they've continued to use the Suez Canal, despite the risk of attacks. Maud Lau is their managing director.
How are you getting through the Suez?
Because we are a Chinese company, and also there's a Chinese army vessel, which can protect our vessel in the Red Sea.
There have been reports that the Houthis have agreed to grant safe passage to all Chinese vessels not connected to Israel. While this may lead to increased insurance costs, the China-Europe Express remains a more cost-effective option for transporting goods between the two continents, taking the same amount of time as rail. Even the choice of using Wilhelmshaven's Jedewieser port was a calculated move, says Lau.
Because Wilhelmshaven is a unique deep sea seaport in Germany, not like Hamburg, Bremen, and Wilhelmshaven. And there's port congestions, and our vessel may be anchored several days.
It's also a multimodal terminal port, meaning cargo from the sea can be seamlessly transferred onto trains or trucks and continue its journey through Europe. Great news for the continent's automotive manufacturers, who rely heavily on parts from China. Inside many of the 2,400 20-foot containers on the CEX's maiden journey were lithium-ion batteries, most bound for Hungary's growing electric vehicle industry. The Central European Trade and Logistics Cooperation Zone on the outskirts of Budapest serves as a vital hub connecting the trade and logistics between China and Hungary. Logistics manager Stanley Song.
There have a full blockchain containers we transloaded from Wilhelmshaven to Budapest. The lithium battery and also the new type of energy cars manufacturers had investment a lot, like billions of euros in Hungary. Yes, and we are doing the last mile logistics for them.
The 9,000-kilometer sea journey is being hailed as the fastest shipping route from the Yangtze River Delta to Europe. However, just 3 days before the CEX arrived in Germany, Yemen's Houthi rebels announced they would cease attacks on all non-Israeli vessels in the Red Sea following the ceasefire in Gaza. Whether this will lead to a swift return of other commercial vessels to the Suez Canal remains uncertain, yet with the Gaza ceasefire fragile at best, it may take time for confidence to rebuild, leaving clear waters for the China-Europe Express, whose next sailing is scheduled for the end of next month. Natalie Carney, DW, Wilhelmshaven.
From trade to culture now, it is Spotify poll time. I found a nice little quote for you this week. Can you guess which European philosopher said the following? An honest politician will not be tolerated by a democracy unless he is very stupid, because only a very stupid man can honestly share the prejudices of more than half the nation. Was that from Bertrand Russell, Simone de Beauvoir, Ludwig Wittgenstein, or Niccolò Machiavelli? Head on over to the Spotify app and click on this week's edition of the programme to take part. Last week's question was about things that happened in 1975, and there was a lot to choose from. The end of the Vietnam War, East Timor declares independence from Portugal, the Schengen Treaty is signed, the Helsinki Accords are signed, the release of the film Jaws happens, and Margaret Thatcher becomes British Prime Minister. Well done to everyone who recognised the two Trojan horses in that mix. Schengen was signed in 1985, not 1975, and whilst Margaret Thatcher did indeed become leader of the Conservative Party in 1975, she had to wait a little longer before becoming British Prime Minister. Inside Europe is, of course, available not just on Spotify, but on all the other usual apps as well. 1975, by the way, was also the year of Keith Jarrett's legendary Köln concert. We'll be hearing more about that in just a minute. We end this week's show with a tribute to a musical miracle. Keith Jarrett's now legendary 1975 Köln concert almost didn't happen. In fact, the series of disasters that seemed to be conspiring against it are now the stuff of legend. An exhausted Jarrett, racked by back pain, arrives in Cologne after a long inter-European road trip, only to find that the wrong piano has been put on the stage. Jarrett takes one look at the poorly maintained rehearsal instrument and declares the concert cancelled, only to be persuaded back at the last minute by the tearful implorings of a teenage promoter. Yet, these challenges gave rise to a performance of astonishing creativity, blending jazz, classical, gospel and folk influences into something extraordinary. British pianist Dorian Ford, a long-time admirer of Jarrett, was inspired to honour the 50th anniversary of the Köln concert with a special performance in, you guessed it, Köln. We tasked arts journalist and musician Brendan O'Shea with the story.
I talk about it because it's an excuse to talk about Keith's music, and I'll use any excuse to talk about Keith's music for a lifetime, really.
That's British pianist Dorian Ford, who cites Keith Jarrett as one of his earliest inspirations. Ford began playing jazz in his teens. Discovering Keith Jarrett and the Köln concert proved pivotal in shaping his musical journey.
You know, for me, Cologne is the tip of an iceberg. What is revealed is still this very, very special music world, which is Keith Jarrett.
"50 years later, the pianist Dorian Ford marked the anniversary with a tribute performance at Christuskirche in Cologne, as the Opera House, the original location, undergoes renovations.
The main thing was feeling like it would be really nice to play in Cologne and really sort of feel the vibes, which I really did. I just don't know how to say that any other way, but I sort of feel this is modern American piano music played in Europe. I suppose I'd always had that in the back of my head and never really put that into a thought when I was a kid listening to this music, but I kind of think that's true, and it felt true. So to be in Cologne playing it gave it the edge. It was fantastic.
The Köln concert album, released later in 1975, became a phenomenon, selling over 3.5 million copies and becoming the best-selling solo jazz and piano recording of all time. But it also resonated far beyond jazz audiences.
In a way, you know, I'm advocating for this piece to be, in a way, sort of part of the concert repertoire of the solo piano world. You know, like a Beethoven sonata, it's like, here's a Keith Jarrett sonata, you know. I think that it has three parts to it. I think there's something about it being, let's say, a jazz standard, a classic pop song, and a kind of an evergreen, something very, you know, universal that really gets to people. And it's also a piece of high music, let's say, classical music, extremely well put together, incredible, unique relationship between the hands, all of the, you know, all of these kind of technical things that are very unique to Keith's playing.
Ford was eager to recapture the original atmosphere for his concert on the 24th of January and offered free tickets to anyone who had attended the 1975 concert. Among those he found were Hein and Klaus Erich Hahn. In 1975, they were students in their early 20s. It was a night they've never forgotten.
Wir saßen damals oben
My brother, our two girlfriends, and I were sitting in one of those famous shoebox lodges in the Cologne Opera House, recalls Hein. The first notes immediately captivated us. We glanced at each other and thought, wow, this is something truly special happening here. We got goosebumps. We knew it was a concert we'd never forget. Yes, it was utterly silent the whole time, says Klaus. The tension was incredible. You were captivated. Honestly, it really got to us. With Jarrett's original concert still held in such vivid living memory, British pianist Dorian Ford was conscious of the pressure.
Yeah, no, it's really changed me. And in fact, just preparing for this, I mean, I've never sort of, I suppose, concentrated so hard as I did in order to prepare this concert. And in lots of ways, I had to prepare very hard by not thinking about all of the things that we're talking about. You know, it's the 50th anniversary, it's in Cologne, and Keith.
The Köln concert remains a masterclass in improvisation. Despite the piano's flaws, Jarrett's use of shimmering harmonies, rhythmic patterns, and his raw, emotional humming drew the audience into a profoundly moving performance. I asked Dorian Ford why the Köln concert continues to resonate.
Well, maybe it's nostalgia for baby boomers and it's kind of truth, beauty, light for millennials. But either way, I think it's something to counter the cultural, ideological and ecological extinction. I haven't got long on the planet, so I'm just going to do this while I can.
"50 years on, Keith Jarrett's Köln concert remains a profound reminder of music's ability to transcend adversity and create something timeless. Whether for nostalgia or inspiration, it continues to captivate and connect audiences across generations." Brendan O'Shea for DW, Berlin.
And that is the note on which we end the show. Our feedback address is insideeurope@dw.com. Thanks to everyone who reached out last week with feedback on everything from musical choices to political coverage. This week's show was produced by Sam Baker, me, Kate Laycock, and sound engineers Timon Heidorn and Jürgen Kuhn. Inside Europe comes to you from DW in Bonn, Germany.